In the previous two videos, we created the lifeguard chair with a wireframe, a swept surface, tube solids that create the framework, and then a thickened offset surface to become another solid. These should be organized in the layers, as you see on the right. Under guard chair, there are sublayers, wireframe, surfaces, and solids. And the solids, it's useful if you group them so that all of the rail solids are together in one group, and that the surface, the thickened surface, is also in a group. So now I can turn off the solids, and we can see the wireframe. It's still there to be adjusted or reworked if necessary. And the surface that we created, and the wireframe structure that was used to create that. So organizing things in that way gives you the opportunity to go all the way back to these wireframes and recreate different surfaces, modify them to create a different tube structure, etc., and save those as variations. The assignment asks you then to make two chairs of your own design, or better yet, a chair and a chaise lounge. So those also require similar sublayers. You can see under each there's a wireframe layer, a surfaces layer, and a solids layer. And again, I encourage you to create the layers, say for guard chair, and then if you're not using a Mac, you can right-click and duplicate the layers and sublayers. So I'm going to switch over to the chair layer and make it visible. And I'll start showing you what we have here. I'm creating, in this case, or I have an example of a chair that's like an Ames chair, as is discussed in the handout with the assignment. And you'll notice that I have a much more complex wireframe that I've created, but I used exactly the same techniques. I created squares in plan, I copied them up, scaled them or offset them to make indentations. And in this case, I've created a more complex piece of geometry for the what will become the leg of the chair. I've arrayed that in a polar array around to create 4 of those. And together with some of the other base geometry, I've created a solid set of pipes for the chair base. And I'm asking you to make your bases for the chair and the chaise lounge to be more complex, perhaps with triangulation, or you could even get into curved structures down here, circular or arced structures. As long as they're based on wireframe geometry, that's what counts. So that's one thing that I'm looking for, and these are all grouped together and placed on the solids layer. Now I want to focus on creating the chair surface, a few more editing tools, and different surface creation techniques to create a chair surface. Notice that I have 4 cross sections here and a centerline section, again following the same procedures as I showed for the guard chair. And in this case, I've modified the cross sections, as you can see when I turn this straight on. You can see that they are wider and that they have been modified. And I'm going to show that modification procedure as well as other ways of modifying using edit points again. So first I'll delete these 3 that I had. I essentially started this with just the front one. I'm going to hide a bunch of this geometry, and you can see other pieces of geometry that I've used along the way to give myself guidelines and center lines and whatnot. But I'll just focus on the 2 main curves here. So the center line of the chair and a cross-section curve. I did create those using a custom construction plane in the center line of the chair, and I will use that again, but first I'm going to leave that just in the world top plane. And so the procedure that I used to take this curve and multiply it along that path was the one that we looked at before, the array along curve command. And so it wants to know the curve. It was already selected. It wants the path. The number is 4. And you'll notice before I start that actually that I took this curve, I created it vertically, but then I rotated it to be more or less perpendicular to the end of this curve, and that will help. I just rotated it here in the right-hand window using a rotate command to rotate that around, so that now when I copy it along this curve, you'll notice that it adjusts itself so that it comes out at the top end also relatively perpendicular to that curve. So you might want to do something like adjust the angle of the cross sections to the center line before you array them. So now if we look in the top view, we see that we have 4 cross-section curves, all of them the same width. And one way that we can start to modify a chair like this is to simply start moving these in and out using their edit points. And I'm going to do that in the top view, and I'm going to take all of those curves and I'm going to turn the edit points on. I just want to make sure that I recognize which way I'm facing for a minute. So in this case, in the top view, the top of the chair is at the bottom, so that's for reference. I'm going to select them all, turn on edit points, and one by one I'm going to take some of these edit points in pairs laterally on each side, let's say for this middle one, and I'm going to this time use a scale command, which might seem very odd to scale these, but what it means I can do is I can select a center point and I can scale these outward by, let's say, 30% by saying 1.3, and they will move symmetrically outward to a 30% line. I can then take the next curve up and I can scale those outward by 15%, right? So I can do the scale command again and give it an origin point, which in this case is the center of that curve. I'm using my midpoint OSNAP, and I can give it 1.15, so 15% enlargement. And I can then take the top of the chair if I want to, and I can actually make it narrower, again by selecting with a window the edit points on the outside, not the one in the middle. Say return. And I'll give it the origin point in the middle, and I'll say 0.95%. So 0.95, 5% smaller. So now they are all modified, and so we see that we will get a differently shaped surface. I'll turn the edit points off just by hitting escape twice. And I can now start to create surfaces with these curves. I could also create a variety of different curves and save them perhaps on sublayers of the wireframes. But actually I'm going to go to the surface layer, and you'll see a few surfaces here that I've created. I will show you the results of 2 different operations using curves a lot like these. And I'm going to come down here and turn on the surfaces main layer. And what you see here is a version of this surface created again using the surface one rail. If I use the surface sweep one rail command and I select the rail in the middle, and now I select the cross sections, you'll notice that the edge that's created is wavy. And that might not be what you want, but we can work with that. So I could take that and move it. I'm going to delete that for now. And I want to show you the difference if we use a loft command without a center line to create a similar surface. So again, we're going to say surface loft, and it doesn't want a center line, it just wants a series of curves in order. And notice what it does. It connects them in a much more pleasing sweep, although it does not follow the center line curve as precisely as a sweep would do. So it's really close, and this is a good result, but I want to show you, using the geometry that I created before, what we could do with what you might think is a less good-looking surface. I'm going to actually delete the lofted surface I just created, and I'm going to take the geometry that I've created here and turn off the wireframes. And I'll show you a technique for trimming this out, again using a custom construction plane. So I'm on the C-Planes tab, and I'll make a 3-point construction plane. Again, something we've done in previous exercises numerous times. But I'm setting it, you'll notice, I'm using the corners of this swept surface, right? First the lower left, then the right for the X, lower left for the origin, right for the X, upper left for the Y. I've created a new construction plane that is touching the corners of this, and I can use this drawing on that surface, and I'm going to draw on that a curve connecting the midpoints of that surface. We want to look down at the O-snaps very carefully here and turn off quad and knot and vertex, the ones that have to do with parts of a surface that you can refer to. And I'll make sure that the project button, it doesn't get a checkpoint, it gets grayed in on my computer, is turned on. And what's going to happen is the geometry that we are referring to on the surface will be projected to the C-plane to make a smooth curve. And so we're going to use a simple interpolate points curve starting from the midpoint of the surface. You'll notice that I'm clicking on the midpoint of the surface. The point is showing up here in space on the construction plane. So the next midpoint places it there, this midpoint, that midpoint, and finally back where we started. And what that's done is created a very smooth curve. It goes off the edges of the wavy surface of the chair. So we'll want to take that and do a simple offset. Something like 4 inches should work inward to get a nice looking curve. And again, you could take this new curve that you've created and you could turn on its edit points and start to give it even a different shape than it has. But what we're going to use it for is to trim the surface. A couple of ways you could do that. You could extrude this straight as a surface itself and extrude it down through and use that to trim this away. Would work just fine. But I also want to let you know that you can take this curve, which we projected from points up onto the C-plane, and now we can take and project it back down onto the surface using the project curves button that's right there on the left, and project that down onto the surface so that we could then select that curve and use it to trim this surface away, so that we don't have the big wavy edges that we had when we started. I could put this curve that I created also into the wireframe layer, changing its property, its layer to chair wireframes. And I could use this curve to create the chair seat. I could turn on edit points for this surface, and I could start to adjust its shape and form, remembering that the edit points for a surface look different. They're these control points, which show us a mesh largely connected to the original untrimmed surface. But adjusting these in some sort of uniform manner, if I can select them uniformly, a group of these can be moved and adjusted, sometimes with not the results that you want, creating bumps in the surface. You've got to be careful where you're moving them and how, in which viewports. But that might be a way that you would want to start to adjust your three-dimensional surface. And then you can take that and you can create a solid extrude surface straight. And it helps here to be using the newly created construction plane because it will extrude pretty much perpendicularly to the surface. So I could make this 0.5 inches thick and create a new solid called a polysurface that I can move to the solids layer. So when I turn on solids and make that the layer that I'm working with and turn off the surfaces layer, I now have a solid that is not perfect. Again, it needs some adjustment, I think, in either a different video or in class in demonstrations tomorrow. Thank you.